In September 1997, beneath the calm beauty of Washington Park in Albany, New York, an ordinary maintenance job turned into a horrifying discovery. On the morning of September 7th, city workers were digging an irrigation line near a flower bed close to the park's historic Moses Monument. Everything seemed routine, until one employee noticed something unusual resting in the soil nearby. A blue pillowcase, possibly a laundry bag, stood out against the earth. It didn't belong there. When they looked inside, they realized it was not trash. It was the body of a newborn baby. What began as a normal workday instantly became the start of one of Albany's most disturbing and heartbreaking investigations. A case that would haunt the city for years. The bag was scorched at one end, its fabric blackened by fire. Scattered across the top were burned wooden matches, a detail that immediately made the workers uneasy. At first, they assumed it was just abandoned trash. One of the employees gently pushed the bag with his shovel. What happened next stopped everyone cold. As the bag shifted, the body of a newborn infant slipped out and fell into the flower bed, landing face down in the soil. Within minutes, the park was sealed off as police rushed to the scene. What had started as routine maintenance had suddenly become a full-scale criminal investigation. Officers were left with urgent questions. Who left the baby there? Who were the parents? And how could something so tragic happen in the middle of a public park? Investigators quickly noticed that the infant's umbilical cord was still attached, a clear sign the baby had been born very recently. The burned fabric wrapped around the body, along with scorch marks on the baby's back, head, and neck, suggested someone had tried to set fire to either the wrapping or the body itself. It appeared to be a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence. Medical examiners later confirmed the baby had been born alive and showed no signs of illness or physical injury. The infant was believed to be less than 12 hours old at the time of death. With no visible trauma, authorities determined the most likely cause was suffocation. In the days that followed, Albany detectives launched an intensive investigation, determined to uncover who was responsible and why. Investigators canvassed the surrounding neighborhoods, appealed to the public for tips, and searched trash receptacles for any sign of evidence. They contacted hospitals, colleges, clinics, and schools, hoping to locate a woman who may have recently given birth or sought medical treatment. But despite the scale of the search, no solid leads emerged. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The infant's identity remained unknown. With no answers, the baby was laid to rest in Washington Park beneath a small headstone. He was given a name, Moses Washington, a symbolic tribute to where he was found and a reminder of a life that ended before it truly began. For more than 20 years, the case remained cold. Then, in the fall of 2020, everything changed. As COVID-19 restrictions kept many New Yorkers at home, detectives began reopening long-dormant cases. Advances in DNA technology had reached a point that made it possible to test evidence that had been unusable in the 1990s. In 2022, forensic specialists finally succeeded in developing a viable DNA profile from the preserved materials. That breakthrough led to a critical discovery. An FBI analysis connected the infant's DNA to a relative in a genetic database. Whether the information entered the system through criminal records or genealogy services was unclear, but it gave investigators their first real lead in over 2 decades. Following that connection, detectives focused on a family with roots in Roxbury, a rural town in Delaware County, roughly 70 miles from Albany. Their search narrowed to women who would have been of childbearing age in 1997 and who may have been present in the Albany area at the time. One name stood out, Carrie S. Mazuka. Born in 1972, Mazuka grew up in Roxbury and later attended college at SUNY Delhi. In the mid-1990s, she relocated to the Albany region, later marrying and becoming a mother to 2 children before divorcing. To confirm their suspicions, detectives collected discarded items from outside her residence and submitted them for DNA testing. The results were conclusive. The DNA matched that of the infant found in Washington Park. In September 2024, nearly 27 years after the crime, Mazuka was arrested. During questioning, she admitted to suffocating her newborn son shortly after birth and attempting to burn the body. The child's biological father was also identified, but investigators determined he had no knowledge of the pregnancy and was not involved. In February 2025, Mazuka entered a guilty plea. She was 25 years old at the time of the crime. Her conviction included charges related to tampering with evidence. During sentencing on April 18, 2025, she expressed remorse and asked the court for leniency, stating that she had lived an otherwise law-abiding life. The court disagreed. Mazuka was sentenced to 25 years in state prison, bringing an end to one of Albany's longest and most haunting unsolved cases. A detective who spent years on the case later reflected that investigations like these never truly disappear from the minds of those who work them. Police Chief Brendan Cox explained that no case is ever truly forgotten. For law enforcement, there are no cold cases. Every investigation remains alive, waiting for the day when answers finally come. Their mission, he said, is to keep searching, to keep pushing forward, and to never stop fighting for justice and closure for victims and their families. Following Mazuka's conviction, she was sentenced to 25 years in state prison, to be followed by 5 years of post-release supervision. But while one case finally reached its conclusion, another mystery from decades earlier had already begun to surface. In September 1984, a motorist traveling along Interstate 93 in New Hampshire made a discovery that would reopen a long-forgotten mystery. The story began years earlier in South Boston, Massachusetts. Brian Watson was born in 1961 and grew up in the close-knit neighborhoods of South Boston. At 23 years old, he was known to stay in regular contact with his family, which is why his sudden disappearance immediately raised alarm. When Brian failed to return home and stopped answering calls, his mother knew something was wrong. Days passed, then more days. The silence was unlike him. Unable to ignore her growing fear, she reported him missing. The report was officially filed on July 28, 1984, nearly 2 weeks after Brian was last seen. Police opened an investigation, classifying the case as a missing adult. But the sudden break in routine and lack of communication suggested that something more serious may have occurred. Detectives began by interviewing family members and reviewing Brian's recent movements. They spoke with friends, acquaintances, and anyone who had seen him in the days before he vanished. Officers retraced his steps through the neighborhoods and businesses he was known to frequent. Every small detail mattered. For 2 months, there were no answers. Then on September 16th, everything changed. A driver traveling southbound on Interstate 93 near Manchester noticed something unusual just off the roadway. Roughly 40 feet from the pavement, he saw what appeared to be a body lying in the brush. Authorities were called to the scene immediately. Dental records were used to confirm the victim's identity. It was Brian Watson. The missing person case was now a homicide investigation. The medical examiner later determined that Brian had died from a gunshot wound. While details were limited, the ruling made one thing clear. His death was not accidental. With the discovery crossing state lines, a joint task force was formed. The New Hampshire State Police, Manchester Police Department, Boston Police Department, and federal authorities joined forces to piece together Brian's final days and uncover who was responsible. What began as a disappearance had become a murder mystery stretching across multiple states and decades of unanswered questions. For years, investigators refused to let Brian Watson's case fade into history. They continued re-examining evidence, revisiting witness statements, and following every possible lead, determined to uncover what had happened on the night Brian vanished. Even as decades passed, the case remained active. Then around 2009, nearly 25 years after Brian disappeared, detectives uncovered a promising development. It pointed toward possible suspects, but the evidence was still not strong enough to bring formal charges. Once again, the case stalled. Frustrating, but not forgotten. The investigation finally gained new momentum when authorities uncovered links to a dispute involving illegal drug activity connected to Whitey Bulger's criminal network. Within that context, investigators determined that Michael Lewis and another man were responsible for disposing of Brian's body. This connection gave the long-running investigation a clearer direction. Years later, a new witness came forward, referred to in court as Witness 2. The witness claimed that Lewis had spoken repeatedly about killing Brian. Although the statements alone were not enough to file charges, they provided a critical lead that detectives had never been able to confirm before. Investigators reviewed decades of evidence, and began connecting long missing pieces. This time, everything aligned. On May 27, 2022, a grand jury returned a first-degree murder indictment against Michael Lewis, then 61 years old and still tied to South Boston. According to prosecutors, on or about July 16th or 17th of 1984, Lewis and another man, both involved in South Boston's drug trade, were searching for a rival dealer they wanted removed from the neighborhood. While driving through South Boston, they encountered Brian Watson. The second man asked Brian if he could lead them to the dealer. Brian agreed and climbed into the backseat of their car. As they drove through the city, Lewis suddenly turned and shot Brian. The two men then drove north into New Hampshire and dumped Brian's body along Interstate 93 near Manchester. For decades, Brian's family lived without answers. In court, they finally had a chance to speak. They described Brian as a loving father, devoted brother, and fiancé, a man whose life was full of promise. His fiancé told the court, "We were young, full of plans, full of love, and full of hope. All of that was stolen the night Brian's life was taken." His sister said the loss had haunted their family for more than 40 years. His daughter spoke of growing up with the emptiness left behind. On November 5, 2025, Lewis pleaded guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter, one for Brian's 1984 killing and another for an unrelated 1993 murder. He was sentenced to 2 concurrent 15-year prison terms at Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center. With the plea, Brian Watson's case, nearly 40 years old, was finally closed. Authorities called the resolution a testament to investigators who refused to let time stand in the way of justice. For Brian's family, it marked the end of decades of uncertainty and the beginning of long overdue closure. Kirk Kimberly had just crossed into adulthood. In 2016, he graduated from Rancho Cotad High School, a milestone that marked the beginning of his next chapter. He was disciplined, athletic, and full of ambition. Outside the classroom, Kirk dedicated himself to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a sport that demanded focus, strength, and control. Adventure defined his life. He raced dirt bikes, camped with his family on weekends, and loved the outdoors. With his mother working as a scuba instructor, Kirk also developed a passion for diving, spending countless hours in the water. He had plans. His next step was starting work at a machine shop in Rohnert Park, a move toward independence and responsibility. But while Kirk was planning for the future, danger was already moving toward him. On October 17, 2016, Kirk left his home in Cotati, riding his white Cannondale mountain bike. He told his family he was going to meet a friend. It was an ordinary afternoon. Nothing about his departure suggested it would be the last time they would see him alive. When Kirk didn't come home that night, worry set in. 2 days later, with still no word from him, his father filed a missing person report. Police launched an investigation, tracing Kirk's final movements and searching for answers. His family clung to hope, believing he might still be found safe. Weeks passed. Then on November 2nd, a landscaper working near Sonoma State University made a chilling discovery. While clearing brush in a wooded area known as the Badlands, roughly 200 yards from a campus parking lot, he uncovered a shallow grave. Inside was Kirk. He had no connection to the university, yet his life had ended there, hidden in a remote patch of woods west of the Green Music Center. An autopsy revealed Kirk had been killed by multiple stab wounds. It was a violent, deliberate act, and it shattered his family. Detectives determined early on that Kirk had not been the victim of a random attack. The crime was targeted. More than 100 people were interviewed as investigators worked to reconstruct his final hours. The community rallied around the family, raising over $12,500 in reward money in hopes that someone with information would come forward. From the beginning, one name stood out: Daniel Carrillo, a former high school classmate of Kirk's. Cell phone GPS data placed Carrillo on the Sonoma State University campus on October 17, 2016, at the exact time Kirk was killed. That digital footprint became the foundation of the case. On February the 28th, 2020, Carrillo, then 20 years old, was arrested while being transferred from a youth detention facility. The case moved slowly through the courts. An initial trial ended in a mistrial due to flaws discovered at a forensic lab that had impacted hundreds of cases across California. But in February 2025, nearly 9 years after Kirk's death, justice finally arrived. Daniel Carrillo was convicted of first-degree murder. For Kirk's family, the verdict brought a measure of closure, though nothing could ever replace the life that was taken. A son, a brother, a friend, gone far too soon. The verdict brought answers, though it could never erase the pain of the loss. Kirk's parents, Kelly and Jennifer Kimberly, sat in the courtroom surrounded by friends and family as the decision was read aloud before Judge Vernon Nakahara in Sonoma County Superior Court. Kelly held his wife's hands and closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. He later reflected, "We have had our whole life on hold for 8 years. This crime literally caused me to have open-heart surgery." In June 2025, Daniel Carrillo was formally sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would spend the remainder of his life behind bars. Despite their relief, Kelly and Jennifer expressed empathy for Carrillo's family, acknowledging their own suffering. Kelly stated, "We are certainly not happy, but we are relieved." Reflecting on the long investigation, Sonoma County Sheriff's authorities emphasized the dedication of the detectives. For the past 3 years, violent crime detectives have been conducting follow-up interviews and reviewing physical and forensic evidence. Their persistence, meticulous, unwavering, and tireless, had finally delivered justice for Kirk Kimberly, bringing long overdue closure to a grieving family.